What would you do if you discovered that the mother who gave you up for adoption 30 years ago had been watching you from the shadows, documenting every milestone, every triumph, every heartbreak? That she had built a billion-dollar empire driven by guilt and desperate love for a daughter she believed she had no right to know? Sarah Morrison thought she understood her life, a modest Brooklyn art teacher content with her small apartment and her students' smiles. But when a single phone call reveals that her biological mother has died and left her everything, Sarah is thrust into a world of impossible wealth, corporate power, and heartbreaking truths preserved in decades of secret journals. This is a story about the devastating cost of impossible choices, about love that survives across years of silence, and about a woman who must decide whether inheriting a fortune means accepting the pain that built it. In these 8 chapters, you'll witness a journey from resentment to understanding, from poverty to unimaginable wealth, and from a teacher's modest dreams to the responsibility of honoring a legacy forged in sacrifice and regret. Every revelation cuts deeper, every journal entry exposes raw wounds that never healed, and every decision Sarah makes will determine whether her mother's sacrifice was redemption or just another tragedy. Follow our channel for more stories that explore the complicated truth of family, love, and the choices that define us. Like this video if emotional storytelling moves you, and comment below telling us where you're watching from and what you think about impossible sacrifices made in the name of love. The hospital room was bathed in the soft golden light of late afternoon, dust particles dancing in the sunbeams that filtered through half-drawn blinds. Margaret Chin lay propped against pristine white pillows, her once vibrant frame now diminished by illness, yet her eyes still held that familiar spark of determination that had carried her through decades of building her fashion empire. At 78, she had faced countless boardroom battles, weathered economic storms, and rebuilt her company from near bankruptcy twice. But this battle, the one raging inside her body, was one she knew she couldn't win. Her fingers, adorned with rings that had witnessed a lifetime of triumphs and sorrows, trembled slightly as she reached for the glass of water on the bedside table. The oncologist's words from that morning still echoed in her mind. 3 months, perhaps 4 if we're fortunate. Fortune. What a cruel word to use when discussing the countdown to one's final breath. The door opened quietly, and Eleanor Mitchell stepped inside. At 45, Eleanor carried herself with the practiced grace of someone who had spent 2 decades as Margaret's executive assistant, confidant, and, though neither would use the word publicly, closest friend. Her tailored navy suit was impeccable as always, but her eyes betrayed the emotional weight she carried. She had been there through Margaret's divorce, through the hostile takeover attempt of 2015, through the death of Margaret's only sister. Now she was here for this, the final chapter. "The lawyers are ready whenever you are, Margaret," Eleanor said softly, settling into the chair beside the bed. She placed a leather portfolio on her lap, her movements efficient yet gentle. Margaret nodded, her gaze drifting to the window where Manhattan's skyline stretched endlessly. Somewhere out there, in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, lived the daughter she had given up 30 years ago. The daughter who didn't know she existed. The daughter who was about to inherit everything. "Before we begin," Margaret's voice was hoarse but steady, "I need you to understand something, Eleanor. What I'm about to do, it's not madness. It's not the morphine talking. It's the clearest decision I've made in 3 decades. Eleanor reached forward, placing her hand gently over Margaret's. "I know. You don't have to explain." But Margaret needed to. The words had been building inside her like pressure in a sealed vessel, and now, with time running out, they demanded release. "Her name is Sarah. Sarah Morrison. She's 30 years old, teaches art at a public school in Brooklyn, volunteers at a community center on weekends. She paints, beautiful, haunting pieces that should be in galleries but instead hang in the hallways of her school." Margaret's voice cracked slightly. "She has my eyes, Eleanor. I've watched her from a distance for years, and she has my eyes." The confession hung in the air between them. Eleanor had suspected, of course. The mysterious quarterly donations to that particular Brooklyn school, the private investigators' reports that Margaret kept locked in her home safe, the way her employer's face would soften whenever she returned from those unexplained Saturday afternoon drives. "Does she know anything about you?" Eleanor asked carefully. "Nothing. Her adoptive parents, good people, truly good people, told her she was adopted when she was 12. But they never knew my name. The adoption was closed, sealed. I made sure of it." Margaret's laugh was bitter. "I was 23, terrified, alone. Her father had disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant. My parents were dead. I was working 3 jobs just to afford a studio apartment. I couldn't. I thought I was doing the right thing. The machines beside the bed beeped their steady rhythm, marking time in a way that felt both infinite and desperately finite. Margaret's breathing had become slightly labored, and Eleanor instinctively reached for the oxygen mask, but Margaret waved her away. For years, I told myself I was a monster for giving her up. I built this empire, this fortune, thinking that somehow success would erase the guilt. But it never did. Every achievement felt hollow. Every milestone was shadowed by the question, what kind of woman abandons her own child? Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. And then 5 years ago, I hired someone to find her. Just to know she was okay, I told myself. Just to see that she had a good life. And she does, Eleanor said gently. From everything you've told me, Sarah is happy, fulfilled, loved. She is. But she's also struggling financially, working 2 jobs to afford that tiny apartment, using her own money to buy art supplies for students whose families can't afford them. She's brilliant and generous, and everything I hoped she would be, and she's barely scraping by while I'm sitting on a fortune I'll never have time to spend. Margaret's voice grew stronger, more resolute. That ends now. Eleanor opened the portfolio, revealing the documents inside. The lawyers have prepared everything according to your instructions. Chin Fashion Empire, all subsidiaries, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolio, everything transfers to Sarah Morrison upon your death. Total estimated value, $2.3 billion. The number seemed abstract, almost meaningless in the quiet intimacy of the hospital room. Margaret had spent 30 years building that fortune, and now it would pass to a woman who didn't even know she existed. She'll think it's a mistake, Margaret said quietly. When she gets the call from your office, when you tell her who she is to me, what she's inherited, she'll think it's a scam or a joke. That's why I'll go to her in person, Eleanor replied. With the DNA test results, the sealed adoption records, everything she needs to understand the truth. And with your letter. Margaret's hand moved to the envelope on her bedside table, the cream-colored paper smooth beneath her fingertips. She had written and rewritten that letter dozens of times over the past 3 months, trying to find words adequate to explain a lifetime of absence, regret, and desperate love for a child she had never truly known. Will she hate me? The question came out as barely a whisper. Eleanor squeezed her hand. I don't know, Margaret, but you're giving her the chance to decide for herself. That's more than secrets and silence would allow. Sarah Morrison stood before her classroom's bulletin board, carefully pinning up her students' latest watercolor projects. Each piece represented hours of patient instruction, of showing 12-year-olds how to blend colors, how to see light and shadow, how to translate the chaos of emotion into something visible and beautiful. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of PS 147, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floors that had seen decades of footsteps, dreams, and disappointed budgets. Her phone buzzed in her pocket for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Sarah ignored it, focusing instead on arranging young Marcus's painting of his grandmother's kitchen, all warm oranges and deep browns that somehow captured the smell of Sunday dinners and unconditional love. This was what mattered, she told herself. Not whatever spam caller had gotten her number, not the overdue electric bill sitting on her kitchen counter, not the landlord's latest threat about raising rent. Miss Morrison? 10-year-old Lily Chin appeared at her elbow, clutching a paintbrush like a talisman. Can I stay after school and work on my project some more? Sarah's heart clenched. Lily was brilliant, genuinely gifted, but her parents worked double shifts at a restaurant in Chinatown and couldn't afford private art lessons. The girl stayed late most days, hungry for instruction, for encouragement, for someone to tell her that her dreams of becoming an artist weren't foolish. Of course, sweetheart. Let me just check this message real quick, and then we'll set you up with fresh paper, okay? Sarah finally pulled out her phone, expecting to see another robocall about her car's extended warranty. A particularly absurd message considering she didn't own a car. Instead, the screen displayed 3 missed calls from the same unknown number and a voicemail notification that seemed to pulse with unusual urgency. Something in Sarah's chest tightened. Her adoptive parents were both healthy, her friends knew to text rather than call, and the school had her work number. Who would be calling her personal cell with such persistence? She pressed play on the voicemail, holding the phone slightly away from her ear as she helped Lily gather her supplies with her free hand. Ms. Morrison, my name is Eleanor Mitchell. I'm calling on behalf of Chin Fashion Empire, regarding an urgent legal matter that requires your immediate attention. This is not a sales call or solicitation. Please, it's imperative that you return this call as soon as possible. The matter concerns your biological family and your inheritance rights. Again, this is Eleanor Mitchell at. The woman's voice was professional, measured, but carried an undercurrent of something Sarah couldn't quite identify. Sympathy? Grief? The paintbrush slipped from Sarah's fingers, clattering against the floor with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet classroom. Lily looked up at her with concern, but Sarah barely noticed. Her biological family. The words echoed in her mind like stones dropped into a still pond, ripples spreading outward, disturbing everything. She had been 12 when her parents, her real parents, the ones who had raised her, loved her, taught her to ride a bike, and helped her through heartbreak, had sat her down in their living room and explained that she was adopted. They had been gentle, careful, emphasizing that being chosen was special, that blood didn't make a family. Sarah had nodded, had said she understood, had even managed to smile and hug them and tell them it didn't change anything. But late at night, alone in her room, she had wondered. Who had given birth to her? Why hadn't they wanted her? What was so wrong with her that her own mother had looked at her newborn face and decided to walk away? Those questions had faded over the years, buried under college applications and art school dreams and the daily struggle of building a life. She had told herself she didn't care, that she didn't need to know. Her parents, Tom and Jennifer Morrison, were her real family. The woman who had carried her for 9 months was just biology, nothing more. So why was her hand shaking as she gripped the phone? Why did her throat feel tight, her breath shallow? Miss Morrison? Lily's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you okay? You look really pale. Sarah forced herself to focus on the child's concerned face. I'm fine, honey. I need to make a quick phone call. Can you start sketching out your composition while I step into the hallway? I'll be right back, I promise. The hallway was empty, the sounds of other teachers wrapping up their days muffled behind closed doors. Sarah's fingers trembled as she dialed the number from the voicemail. Each ring felt like an eternity, her mind racing through possibilities. A mistake. It had to be a mistake. Or a scam. Yes, probably a scam. Someone had gotten her name from the adoption registry somehow, was going to try to convince her that some long-lost relative had left her money, and all she needed to do was provide her bank account information. Eleanor Mitchell speaking. The voice was the same as the voicemail, controlled, professional, but with that underlying warmth that suggested genuine emotion carefully contained. This is Sarah Morrison. I'm returning your call. Sarah was proud of how steady her voice sounded, betraying nothing of the chaos swirling inside her chest. Ms. Morrison, thank you for calling back. I know this must be confusing, and I apologize for the cryptic voicemail, but what I need to discuss with you is sensitive and extremely important. Are you somewhere private where we can talk freely? I'm at work. I'm a teacher. What is this about? Sarah's defenses were rising, her rational mind trying to reassert control. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could hear papers rustling in the background, the distant sound of traffic that suggested a city office building. Ms. Morrison, 3 days ago, Margaret Chin passed away. Before her death, she left explicit instructions regarding her estate. Margaret was your biological mother, and she has named you as the sole heir to her entire fortune. The hallway tilted. Sarah pressed her free hand against the wall, her palm flat against the cool painted cinder block. Margaret Chin. The name meant nothing to her, yet it meant everything. Her biological mother had a name. Had a name. Past tense. Dead. Gone before Sarah even knew she existed. I don't understand, Sarah whispered. Why would she? I mean, she gave me up. Why would she leave me anything? That's a conversation we need to have in person. Ms. Morrison, I know this is overwhelming, but I'm asking you to meet with me. Tomorrow, if possible. I have documents you need to see, a letter from Margaret, and information about your inheritance that will require legal assistance to navigate. Eleanor paused. Your biological mother left you everything, Sarah. Chin Fashion Empire, all its holdings, investments, properties. The total value is approximately $2.3 billion. The number was so absurd that Sarah almost laughed. 2.3 billion. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. She was Sarah Morrison, Brooklyn art teacher, whose most valuable possession was a slightly battered Honda Civic, and whose greatest financial achievement was having $20 left over at the end of each month. This is a scam, Sarah said flatly. I don't know how you got my information, but... Your birthday is March 15th, 1995. You were born at Mount Sinai Hospital at 3:47 in the morning. Your birth weight was 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Your biological mother held you for exactly 4 hours before signing the adoption papers. Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. I can prove every word I'm saying, Sarah. Please, just meet with me. Let me show you the truth. The address Eleanor had given Sarah led to a gleaming tower in Midtown Manhattan, the kind of building Sarah usually walked past without a second glance, assuming it housed hedge funds and corporate law firms far removed from her world of finger paint and construction paper. The lobby was all polished marble and chrome, with a security desk manned by guards in crisp uniforms who looked at her worn canvas messenger bag and paint-stained jeans with barely concealed skepticism. I have an appointment with Eleanor Mitchell, Sarah said, her voice sounding small in the vast space. Chin Fashion Empire? The guard's expression shifted immediately, morphing from dismissive to professionally courteous. He checked his computer, made a quick phone call, then directed her to a bank of elevators with the kind of deference usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. Sarah caught her reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls as it climbed silently to the 43rd floor. Her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, her second-hand blazer that she saved for parent-teacher conferences, the shadows under her eyes from 3 nights of insomnia since Eleanor's phone call. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who didn't belong here, thrust into a situation that felt increasingly surreal with each passing moment. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that could have been featured in an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Manhattan, the city sprawling below like a jeweled tapestry. A receptionist with perfect hair and a warmer smile than Sarah expected greeted her immediately. Ms. Morrison, Ms. Mitchell is expecting you. Please follow me. They walked down a hallway lined with photographs, fashion shows, magazine covers, celebrities wearing elegant designs that Sarah vaguely recognized from department store windows. And in many of the photos, always slightly in the background or off to the side, was the same woman. Petite, elegant, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that seemed to hold entire universes of complicated emotion. Margaret Chin, her biological mother. Sarah's steps slowed as she studied one particular photograph. Margaret at what appeared to be a charity gala, wearing a midnight blue gown, her smile gracious but not quite reaching her eyes. There was something in her expression, a guardedness, a carefully maintained distance from the glittering world surrounding her. She was a very private person, the receptionist said softly, noticing Sarah's attention. Despite all the public appearances, Ms. Mitchell is just through here. The office they entered was spacious but surprisingly understated. Books lined one wall, legal documents and fashion industry publications mixed with novels and poetry collections. Eleanor rose from behind her desk, and Sarah was struck by how different she looked from the stern corporate executive she had imagined. Eleanor's face was kind, her eyes red-rimmed as though she had been crying recently, her movements gentle as she gestured toward a comfortable seating area by the windows. Thank you for coming, Sarah. May I call you Sarah? When Sarah nodded, Eleanor continued, I know this must feel overwhelming. Would you like coffee, tea, water? Water, please. Sarah's mouth was desert dry, her heart hammering against her ribs. Eleanor poured water from a crystal carafe, her hands steady despite the emotion clearly visible in her face. She settled into the chair across from Sarah, a leather portfolio resting on her lap like a shield or perhaps a peace offering. I worked with Margaret for 23 years, Eleanor began, her voice soft but clear. She was brilliant, demanding, occasionally impossible, and one of the most deeply lonely people I've ever known. She never married, never had other children. She built an empire, but she always said it felt hollow. Eleanor's eyes met Sarah's directly. She watched you from a distance for 5 years. She knew what school you taught at, that you volunteered at the community center, that you paint in your spare time. She attended one of your student art shows last spring, stood in the back of the gymnasium, and cried. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. She was there, at my school. She was terrified you would recognize her somehow, though you'd never seen her face. She bought 3 of your students' paintings anonymously through the auction. They're hanging in her apartment. Eleanor pulled a folder from her portfolio. These are the DNA test results comparing samples from Margaret's medical records with the cheek swab you provided to the adoption registry 12 years ago when you turned 18. The match is conclusive. Margaret Chin was your biological mother. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the documents. The scientific language blurred before her eyes, but the conclusion was clear. Probability of maternity, 99.9997%. It was real. All of it was horrifyingly, impossibly real. Why did she give me up? The question tore from Sarah's throat, raw and aching. If she spent years watching me, caring about me, why did she abandon me in the first place? Eleanor's expression softened with deep compassion. She was 23, pregnant, and completely alone. Your biological father disappeared when she told him about the pregnancy. Margaret's parents had died in a car accident the year before. She was working 3 jobs, barely surviving, living in a studio apartment with broken heating. She believed, truly believed, that she was giving you a chance at a better life. Eleanor paused, choosing her words carefully. Was she right? Were Tom and Jennifer Morrison good parents to you? The question caught Sarah off guard. She thought of her father teaching her to change a tire, her mother sitting through every school play, both of them working overtime to send her to art school, their unwavering belief in her even when her paintings didn't sell and her student loans mounted. They were wonderful, Sarah whispered. They are wonderful. Then perhaps Margaret's sacrifice wasn't entirely in vain. Eleanor reached into the portfolio again, this time withdrawing a cream-colored envelope, slightly worn at the edges as though it had been handled many times. She wrote this for you. She rewrote it dozens of times over the last 3 months of her life, trying to find the right words. I promised her I would give it to you in person, that I would be here when you read it. Sarah's hands shook as she took the envelope. Her name was written across the front in elegant handwriting, Sarah Morrison, and beneath it, in smaller letters, my daughter. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes, tears she had been holding back since Eleanor's first phone call, tears for a woman she had never known, for a relationship that could never be, for all the years of questions and wondering and secret grief. I'm going to step out for a few minutes, Eleanor said gently, rising from her chair. Give you some privacy. Take all the time you need. When the door clicked shut, Sarah was alone with the letter and the crushing weight of everything she had lost before she even knew it existed. The envelope felt impossibly heavy in her hands, containing 30 years of silence, regret, and love expressed too late. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and began to read. The first words were simple, devastating in their honesty. My dearest Sarah, I am writing this from a hospital room, dying of cancer, trying to explain a lifetime of absence in a few inadequate pages. I do not expect your forgiveness. I have no right to your understanding. But I need you to know the truth, even if it comes 30 years too late. Sarah's tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink slightly, but she couldn't stop reading. Margaret's handwriting was elegant but occasionally shaky, as though written through pain or powerful emotion, and Sarah found herself touching the letters as if she could somehow reach back through time and touch the hand that had formed them. I was 23 when I discovered I was pregnant with you. Your father, I won't dignify him with more than that title, was a marketing executive I had been dating for 6 months. When I told him, he suggested abortion as casually as one might suggest dinner plans, and when I refused, he disappeared. Changed his number, moved apartments, vanished so completely it was as though our relationship had never existed. I learned later that he already had a wife and 2 children in Connecticut. I had been nothing more than a Manhattan distraction. My parents had died the year before in a car accident. I had no siblings, no extended family except distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. I was working as a receptionist during the day, waitressing at night, and taking fashion design classes on weekends, trying to build something from nothing. My apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in the Bronx with heating that barely worked and neighbors who screamed at each other through paper-thin walls. When I felt you move inside me for the first time, I was standing on the subway platform after a 12-hour shift, so exhausted I could barely stand. And suddenly there you were, a flutter, a kick, undeniable proof of life. I pressed my hand to my stomach and cried right there on the platform, while commuters flowed around me like water around a stone. I tried, Sarah. God knows I tried to figure out how to keep you. I applied for government assistance, looked into childcare programs, calculated and recalculated budgets that never quite added up. I worked until the day my water broke, terrified every moment that I would lose my job, lose my apartment, lose everything. And when they placed you in my arms, 7 pounds, 2 ounces of perfect, screaming humanity, I looked into your eyes and saw your entire future stretching before me like a dark road. Sarah paused, pressing the letter to her chest as sobs shook her body. The pain in Margaret's words was palpable, reaching across 3 decades to wrap around Sarah's heart and squeeze. She could picture it so clearly. A young woman, alone and terrified, holding her newborn daughter and facing an impossible choice. I held you for 4 hours. The nurses thought I was bonding, preparing to take you home. But I was memorizing you, every tiny finger, every sound you made, the way you gripped my pinky with surprising strength, the perfect curve of your ear, the birthmark on your left shoulder blade shaped like a crescent moon. I was storing memories because I knew they would have to last a lifetime. The adoption counselor had shown me profiles of potential families. I chose Tom and Jennifer Morrison because Jennifer's application essay made me cry. She wrote about years of failed fertility treatments, about a nursery they had painted yellow because they didn't know if they would ever have a boy or a girl, about how she believed some children choose their parents and she was waiting for one to choose them. She wrote about love as an infinite resource, about family being built through choice as much as blood. When they came to take you from my arms, I nearly changed my mind. I opened my mouth to say, no, wait, I've made a mistake. But then I looked around that hospital room at the future I could offer you. A broke, exhausted single mother with no family support, no college degree, no safety net, versus a couple with stable jobs, a house with a yard, extended family, resources to give you everything I couldn't. I signed the papers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The nurse took you away while I turned my face to the wall and sobbed until I had no tears left. I stayed in that hospital bed for 2 days after you were gone, staring at the ceiling, feeling like someone had carved out my internal organs and left only a hollow shell. I left the hospital and threw myself into work with manic intensity. I finished my design degree in 18 months, secured a small business loan, launched Chin Fashion with nothing but ambition and desperation to fill the void you had left. Every success felt empty. Every milestone was haunted by your absence. I attended therapy for years, and my therapist kept asking, "Why can't you forgive yourself?" I never had an answer. The years passed. I built an empire, but I never built a life. I never married, never had other children. How could I, when I couldn't even keep the first one? I threw everything into my business because it was the only thing that didn't remind me of my failure as a mother. And then 5 years ago, on what would have been your 25th birthday, I made a decision. I hired a private investigator to find you. Not to contact you. I had no right to disrupt your life, but simply to know that you were okay, that my sacrifice had been worth it. Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the page. The handwriting here was messier, more urgent, as though Margaret had been racing against time, which Sarah realized with a fresh wave of grief she had been. When the investigator showed me the photos, I couldn't breathe. You were beautiful, Sarah. You are beautiful. But more than that, you were happy. The photos showed you laughing with your students, painting in your small apartment, volunteering at the community center. Your adoptive parents, and they are your real parents, please never doubt that, had given you everything I couldn't. Love, stability, encouragement, the freedom to pursue your passion for art without worrying where your next meal would come from. I attended your student art show last spring. I stood in the back of that gymnasium, surrounded by proud parents and excited children, and watched you guide your students through the exhibition. The way you spoke about their work, with such genuine pride and joy, broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. You were everything I had hoped you would become, and nothing like the bitter, ambitious woman I had turned into. I bought 3 paintings that night. They hang in my living room. Sometimes I sit in front of them and imagine an alternate universe where I kept you, where we painted together on Sunday mornings, where I taught you about fashion, and you taught me to see the world through an artist's eyes. But this is not that universe, and I made my choice 30 years ago. I cannot unmake it. I cannot give you back the mother you deserve to have. But I can give you everything I built, every dollar I earned, every asset I accumulated in my desperate attempt to fill the void your absence created. Eleanor will help you navigate the inheritance. She is loyal, trustworthy, and one of the few people in this world I considered a true friend. Listen to her advice. Be careful. There will be people who want to take advantage of you, who will pretend to care about you while really caring only about your money. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect you to remember me fondly or mourn my passing. But I hope, desperately, foolishly hope, that somewhere in your heart, you might understand that giving you up was the hardest thing I ever did, and loving you from a distance has defined every day of my life since. You were never unwanted, Sarah. You were wanted so much it terrified me. You were loved so deeply I couldn't bear to damage you with my inadequacy. Be happy. Paint beautiful things. Live the life I couldn't give you. With all the love a stranger has no right to claim. Margaret Chin, your biological mother. Sarah didn't realize Eleanor had returned until she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder and a box of tissues being pressed into her lap. She looked up through blurred vision to find Eleanor sitting beside her, tears streaming down her own face. "She loved you," Eleanor said softly. "I watched her struggle with that love for 5 years, torn between wanting to know you and believing she had no right to intrude on your life. Every time she returned from watching you from a distance, she would sit in her office and cry. Success, money, fame, none of it meant anything compared to the daughter she had lost." 3 days after reading Margaret's letter, Sarah sat in her tiny Brooklyn apartment staring at documents that seemed to belong to someone else's life. The coffee table, a thrift store find she had painted herself in shades of teal and gold, was covered in folders, legal papers, financial statements with numbers that made her head spin. Eleanor had delivered them personally, along with a team of lawyers and accountants who spoke in a language Sarah barely understood. Trusts, portfolios, corporate structures, fiduciary responsibilities. "The transition will take approximately 6 months to finalize," the lead attorney, a stern woman named Patricia Chun, no relation to Margaret, despite the surname, had explained. "During that time, you'll need to make decisions about the company's leadership, review all existing contracts, and determine which assets you wish to liquidate versus retain. Ms. Mitchell has agreed to stay on as interim CEO and guide you through the process." Sarah had nodded through the entire meeting, her mind unable to fully grasp what was happening. Yesterday, she had been worried about a $70 electric bill. Today, she owned a fashion empire worth billions. Her phone buzzed with yet another call from a reporter. News of Margaret Chen's death and her shocking decision to leave everything to a previously unknown daughter had leaked to the press 3 days ago, and Sarah's life had exploded into chaos. Journalists camped outside her school, her apartment building, even her parents' house in New Jersey. Her principal had suggested she take a leave of absence until things settled down, which was a polite way of saying her presence was disrupting the entire school. A knock at the door made Sarah jump. She checked the peephole and saw her mother, Jennifer Morrison, holding what appeared to be a casserole dish, and wearing the determined expression she usually reserved for parent-teacher conferences where she suspected her child was being underestimated. "Mom," Sarah said, opening the door and immediately being enveloped in a fierce hug that smelled of lavender and home-cooked food. "You didn't have to drive all the way into the city." "Of course I did. My daughter just inherited a fortune and discovered her biological mother died, all in the same week. Where else would I be?" Jennifer swept into the apartment, set the casserole on the kitchen counter, and immediately began tidying, her stress response to any crisis. "Your father wanted to come too, but someone had to stay and deal with the reporters at our house. We told them you were raised with love and privacy, and we'd appreciate if they respected that. Fat chance of that working, but we tried." Sarah sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted despite having done nothing all day except stare at papers and ignore phone calls. "I don't know what to do, Mom. Everyone keeps asking me questions I can't answer. What are my plans for the company? Will I move into Margaret's apartment? Am I going to continue teaching? And the thing is, I don't know. I don't know anything." Jennifer abandoned her tidying and sat beside her daughter, taking Sarah's hands in her own. Her fingers were warm, familiar, bearing the slight calluses from years of nursing work and the small scar from when she had cut herself making Sarah's 13th birthday cake. Real hands. Present hands. Hands that had been there for every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every triumph. "Can I tell you something?" Jennifer's voice was soft but firm. "When we got the call that there was a baby girl waiting for us, we drove to that hospital, so fast your father got a speeding ticket. And when they placed you in my arms, this tiny, perfect creature with your dark eyes and serious expression, I was terrified. Absolutely terrified. Because I thought, what if I'm not enough? What if I can't be what this child needs?" Sarah squeezed her mother's hands. "You were everything I needed. But I didn't know that then. I was 40 years old, had never changed a diaper in my life, didn't know the difference between a onesie and a sleep sack. Your father and I fumbled through those first months, reading every parenting book, calling the pediatrician at 2 in the morning, convinced every cry meant something was desperately wrong." Jennifer's eyes glistened with tears. "What I'm saying is, nobody knows what they're doing when they're handed something precious and told to figure it out. You just do your best and hope love is enough to cover the gaps. This isn't a baby, Mom. It's a multi-billion-dollar company and a legacy from a woman I never even met." Sarah's voice cracked. "A woman who loved me enough to give me up, who watched me from a distance for years, who died before I could thank her or yell at her or understand her. How am I supposed to honor that? How am I supposed to be worthy of this? Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, studying her daughter's face with the intensity that came from 30 years of really seeing her, of knowing her moods and fears and dreams better than anyone else in the world. Do you want to know what I think Margaret saw when she watched you from a distance? I think she saw a woman who uses her own money to buy art supplies for students whose families can't afford them. A woman who stays late 3 days a week tutoring kids for free. A woman who painted a mural on the community center wall just because she thought the neighborhood children deserved something beautiful to look at. That's different. It's not different. It's exactly the same principle, just a different scale. Margaret built a company, made money, created jobs. You teach children, nurture creativity, make the world gentler and more beautiful one student at a time. Both of you saw a need and tried to fill it. Jennifer cupped Sarah's face in her hands. She didn't leave you this fortune because she thought you would be a brilliant CEO or because she wanted you to become someone different. She left it to you because she knew exactly who you were and believed you would do something meaningful with it. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a small loosening of the terror that had gripped her since Eleanor's first phone call. What if I don't want to run a fashion company? What if I want to keep teaching? Then you keep teaching. You hire people to run the company. Eleanor certainly seems capable and trustworthy. You use the money to fund art programs in underfunded schools. You create scholarships for students who want to pursue creative careers but can't afford it. You live your life, Sarah, and you use the resources you've been given to amplify the good you were already doing. Jennifer smiled. Or you could quit teaching and focus entirely on the business. Or you could sell everything and buy an island and paint all day. The point is, it's your choice. Margaret gave you options, not obligations. The doorbell rang and Sarah groaned. If that's another reporter, I'll handle it. Jennifer marched to the door with the protective fierceness that had once intimidated Sarah's middle school bullies into leaving her alone. She opened it to reveal Eleanor, carrying a large portfolio and looking slightly apologetic. I'm sorry to intrude, Eleanor said, but there's something Sarah needs to see. Something that might help her understand Margaret's intentions more clearly. Jennifer stepped aside, giving Eleanor an assessing look that clearly communicated she was being evaluated and had better pass muster. Eleanor weathered it with grace, nodding respectfully before entering the apartment. What is it? Sarah asked, standing. Eleanor set the portfolio on the coffee table, carefully moving aside the legal documents. Margaret kept journals, hundreds of them, dating back to the year you were born. In her will, she specified that you should have access to them if you wanted. I brought the ones from the last 5 years, the ones she wrote after she found you again. Eleanor paused, her expression tender with grief. Reading them won't bring her back, and some of what's in them might be painful. But if you're wondering what she thought, what she felt, what she hoped for you, it's all here. Sarah looked at the portfolio, then at her mother, then at Eleanor. 2 women who had known her all her life, and one who had known the woman who gave her life. The moment felt impossibly significant, like standing at a crossroads where every direction led to a different version of herself. Will you stay? Sarah asked them both. While I read them. I don't think I can do this alone. Jennifer and Eleanor exchanged a glance, and some wordless understanding passed between them. 2 women who loved Sarah in different ways for different reasons, united in their desire to help her navigate this impossible situation. Of course, they said in unison, and Sarah opened the first journal. The journals were leather-bound, elegant but worn from frequent handling, their pages filled with Margaret's distinctive handwriting. Sarah opened the first one, dated 5 years ago, and began to read while Jennifer and Eleanor sat in respectful silence, occasionally refilling coffee cups or simply being present as witnesses to this intimate archaeology of grief and love. March 15, 2020. Sarah's 25th birthday. The investigator delivered his report today. After all these years of wondering, of imagining, of torturing myself with possibilities, I finally know. Her name is Sarah Morrison. She teaches art at a public school in Brooklyn. She's alive, healthy, and from the photographs, she's beautiful. I spent 3 hours staring at those photos, memorizing every detail. She has my eyes, the same dark brown, the same slightly almond shape. But her smile is different from mine, open and genuine, not the practiced corporate smile I've perfected over decades. She laughs in one of the photos, head thrown back, completely unself-conscious. I don't think I've laughed like that in 30 years. The investigator said she lives modestly, works 2 jobs to make ends meet, volunteers at a community center on weekends. She's exactly the kind of person I hoped she would become, generous, creative, dedicated to helping others. Tom and Jennifer Morrison raised her well. They gave her everything I couldn't. I should be happy. I am happy that she's thriving. But there's also this crushing ache in my chest, this overwhelming regret. I've built an empire worth billions, and my daughter, is struggling to pay rent. The irony is almost unbearable. Eleanor thinks I should reach out, make contact, at least let Sarah know I exist. But how can I? What right do I have to disrupt her life after 30 years of absence? Hello, I'm the woman who gave birth to you, and then disappeared. Surprise! No, that's cruel and selfish. I made my choice 3 decades ago. I have to live with it, but perhaps I can help from a distance. Anonymous donations to her school, funding for their art program. Small things that won't draw attention, but might make her life a little easier. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's all I can give without destroying the peace she's built. Sarah turned the page with trembling hands. The next several entries detailed Margaret's careful observations, always from a distance, never intrusive. She read about Margaret attending a school fundraiser, buying student artwork, donating supplies through untraceable channels. Each entry was suffused with longing and self-recrimination, a woman punishing herself for a choice made out of love and desperation. September 3, 2020. I saw Sarah in person today for the first time since I held her as an infant. I was terrified she would somehow recognize me, though logically I know that's impossible. I stood outside her school as classes let out, just another random person on a Brooklyn street. She was laughing with her students, helping them load art supplies into a van for some kind of field trip. One little girl hugged her legs, and Sarah bent down to her level, saying something that made the child's face light up. The tenderness in that moment, the casual, easy affection, made me realize what I've missed. Not just the big moments, but thousands of small ones. First days of school, scraped knees, bedtime stories, inside jokes, the mundane magic of daily life with a child. I wanted to run across the street and tell her everything. I wanted to explain, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness I don't deserve. Instead, I stood frozen on the sidewalk, tears streaming down my face, until she went back inside. Then I sat in my car for an hour, sobbing like I haven't sobbed since the day I signed the adoption papers. What kind of coward watches her own daughter from across the street and doesn't have the courage to say hello? She wasn't a coward, Eleanor said softly, breaking the silence. Sarah had almost forgotten the other women were there, so absorbed was she in Margaret's words. She was terrified of hurting you, of disrupting the happiness she could see you had built. Every time she went to watch you, she came back to the office destroyed emotionally. I begged her to reach out, to at least send a letter, but she was adamant that she had no right to intrude. Sarah wiped her eyes and continued reading. The entries chronicled a strange parallel existence, Sarah's life unfolding normally, while Margaret documented it from the shadows like some guardian angel without wings. There were entries about Sarah's art exhibition at a local gallery, about her winning a teaching award, about a difficult breakup with a boyfriend that had Margaret simultaneously angry at the man who hurt her daughter and heartbroken that she couldn't offer comfort. April 2nd, 2022. Sarah broke up with that boyfriend, David or Daniel, something with a D. The investigator mentioned she's been withdrawn lately, throwing herself into work. I want so badly to do something, anything. Send flowers, write a note, show up at her door with ice cream and terrible romantic comedies like mothers do in movies. But I'm not her mother. Jennifer Morrison is her mother, the woman who was there for every heartbreak, every triumph, every mundane Tuesday. I'm just the woman whose DNA she shares, a stranger who watches from a distance and pretends surveillance is love. I've been thinking about my will lately. I'm only 52, healthy as far as I know, but none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. If something happened to me, all of this, the company, the money, the properties, would go to various charities. It seems wasteful somehow, impersonal. But leaving it to Sarah would be an imposition, a burden, forcing her to deal with my legacy when she never asked for it. Eleanor says I'm overthinking it. She says any daughter would want to know her biological mother cared, that leaving Sarah my estate would be a gift, not a burden. But Eleanor didn't abandon a child. She doesn't understand the weight of that guilt, the certainty that I forfeited any claim to Sarah's gratitude or love the day I signed those papers. She changed the will anyway, Eleanor interjected quietly. 6 months after that entry, she updated everything to name you as sole heir. She was convinced it was selfish, that she was forcing her guilt onto you, but she couldn't bear the thought of all she had built going to strangers when her daughter was struggling financially. Sarah turned more pages, watching years of her life refracted through Margaret's perspective. It was disorienting, seeing herself through a stranger's loving eyes, realizing that moments she'd barely remembered, a laugh with students, a painting she'd worked on, a volunteer shift at the community center, had been observed, cherished, documented by someone she never knew existed. The entries grew more emotional as time progressed, Margaret's longing intensifying rather than fading. There were pages devoted to imagined conversations, alternate histories where she had kept Sarah, fantasies of mother-daughter relationships that could never be. It was heartbreaking in its honesty, a woman trapped between the life she had chosen and the one she desperately wished she could reclaim. The final journal was different. The handwriting was shakier, often interrupted mid-entry, sometimes just a few sentences per day. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it, knowing what was coming. January 15th, 2025. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The oncologist was very matter-of-fact about it, as though announcing my death sentence was just another item on his calendar between lunch and his afternoon golf game. 3 to 6 months, depending on how aggressively I want to fight. I don't want to fight. I'm tired, and honestly, what am I fighting for? I've accomplished everything I set out to do professionally. I have no family, no one who needs me. Just employees and business associates who will move on within weeks of my funeral. Except, there is someone. Someone who doesn't know I exist, but who I love more than anything I've ever built or earned or achieved. Someone who deserves better than a mystery inheritance from a stranger. I've made a decision. I'm going to write Sarah a letter. I'm going to leave her everything, and I'm going to trust Eleanor to help her navigate what comes next. It's not redemption. I don't believe in redemption for what I did. But perhaps it's a small measure of compensation, a way to finally, belatedly, provide for the daughter I should have kept. The last entry was dated just 2 days before Margaret's death, the handwriting nearly illegible, clearly written through pain or heavy medication. March 8th, 2025. Eleanor showed me a video someone posted online of Sarah's students performing a play they wrote themselves about famous artists throughout history. Sarah directed it, designed the costumes from donated materials, taught those children that creativity matters even when the world tells them it doesn't. I'm dying, and I'll never meet her, never hear her voice except on recordings, never tell her that watching her from a distance has been the greatest privilege of my life. But I'm not sorry I found her. These 5 years of knowing she exists, seeing who she became, understanding that my sacrifice wasn't in vain, it's been worth every moment of heartbreak. Sarah, if you're reading this, please know, you were never a burden. You were never unwanted. You were loved so completely that letting you go nearly destroyed me, and loving you from afar has defined every day since. The page was stained with watermarks, tears, Sarah realized, that Margaret had shed while writing these final words. Sarah closed the journal and looked up at Eleanor and her mother through blurred vision. She loved me, she whispered, the truth of it finally, fully sinking in. She really loved me. More than anything, Eleanor confirmed. You were her whole world, even though you never knew she existed. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood outside Margaret's apartment building in the Upper East Side, staring up at the elegant pre-war facade with its limestone detailing and doorman in a crisp uniform. Eleanor stood beside her, holding a key card and wearing an expression of gentle encouragement mixed with apprehension. You don't have to do this today, Eleanor said softly. We can come back whenever you're ready. But Sarah shook her head. She had spent the past 2 weeks reading and rereading Margaret's journals, studying the photos the investigator had taken, trying to piece together the woman who had loved her from a distance for 5 years. The apartment was the final piece of the puzzle, the intimate space where Margaret had lived her private life away from corporate meetings and fashion shows. I need to do this, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. I need to see where she lived, how she lived. I need to understand her. The doorman recognized Eleanor immediately and greeted them with respectful condolences. Ms. Chun was a wonderful woman, he said as he held the door. Very private, very kind. She always remembered my daughter's name, asked about her college applications. The building won't be the same without her. They rode the elevator to the 15th floor in silence. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as Eleanor unlocked the apartment door and stepped aside, allowing Sarah to enter first. The apartment was breathtaking in its understated elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Central Park, the afternoon sun streaming through sheer curtains that softened the light to something almost ethereal. The space was furnished with pieces that were clearly expensive but chosen for comfort rather than showiness. A deep sofa in soft gray, chairs upholstered in cream fabric, a coffee table made of reclaimed wood that showed the marks of regular use. But what struck Sarah most were the walls. Every available surface was covered with art. Not famous paintings or prestigious gallery pieces, but children's artwork, watercolors and crayon drawings, construction paper collages, and finger paintings. They were matted and framed with the same care one might give to a Picasso, each one labeled with a small brass plaque bearing a name and date. Marcus Johnson, age 11, my grandmother's kitchen. Emma Rodriguez, age 9, sunset over Brooklyn. Tyler Washington, age 12, the tree outside my window. Sarah read the plaques with growing disbelief, recognizing the names of her students from the past 5 years. She bought all of these? From our school fundraisers? Every single one, Eleanor confirmed. She attended every art show, always staying in the back, always bidding anonymously through me or other proxies. She told me once that these paintings were more valuable to her than anything in her corporate art collection because they represented you, your influence, your teaching, your impact on these children. Sarah moved through the apartment as if in a dream, her fingers trailing along furniture that Margaret had touched, books that Margaret had read. The kitchen was spotless but clearly used. A well-worn cookbook open on the counter to a recipe for homemade pasta sauce, notes scribbled in the margins about adjusting seasonings. The bedroom was simple, almost austere, dominated by a large bed with white linens and a reading chair positioned by the window. On Margaret's nightstand sat a framed photograph, and Sarah's breath caught when she saw it. The image showed a young woman, Margaret at maybe 22 or 23, standing in front of a small apartment building, holding her pregnant belly and smiling tentatively at the camera. It was the only photograph Sarah had seen of Margaret pregnant with her, the only visual evidence that those 9 months had existed. She kept that by her bed until the day she died, Eleanor said quietly, having followed Sarah into the bedroom. The investigator found it in storage, some old box of mementos from her early years in the city. She had it restored and framed, and she looked at it every morning and night. Sarah picked up the frame with trembling hands, studying the young woman who would become her biological mother. Margaret looked so young, so vulnerable, her hand protective over her swollen stomach, her expression caught between hope and fear. Sarah tried to imagine what she had been thinking in that moment, what dreams or worries had occupied her mind. The closet was filled with clothes that represented decades of fashion evolution. Vintage pieces from the early days of Chin fashion, hanging beside recent designs, each garment telling a story of Margaret's journey from struggling designer to industry icon. But what caught Sarah's attention was a small box on the top shelf, labeled simply Sarah, in Margaret's handwriting. "I haven't looked in that," Eleanor admitted. "Margaret mentioned it in her will, said it was for you specifically. She assembled it during her final weeks." Sarah lifted the box down carefully, her hands shaking. Inside, she found a collection of items that painted a portrait of obsessive, desperate love. Every article ever written about Sarah's teaching awards, programs from her students' performances, photographs from a distance showing Sarah at various ages and occasions, and tucked at the bottom, a tiny hospital bracelet. Baby girl Chin, March 15, 1995, 3:47 a.m., 7 pounds 2 ounces. "She kept my hospital bracelet," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She kept it for 30 years. Beneath the bracelet was an envelope marked, to be opened only after reading my journals." Sarah's hands fumbled with the seal, extracting a single sheet of paper covered in Margaret's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, you've made it to my apartment. You've seen my life, such as it was. I hope you're not disappointed by how small it turned out to be, just work and silence and memories of you. There's something I need to tell you that I couldn't say in the other letter, something I've never told anyone, not even Eleanor. The day I signed the adoption papers and they took you away, I went back to my apartment and packed a bag. I was going to jump from the Brooklyn Bridge. I was 23, alone, and I had just given away the only person in the world who was truly mine. I couldn't see any reason to continue existing. I stood on that bridge for 2 hours. It was raining, cold, miserable March rain, and I kept thinking about how easy it would be to just let go, to end the pain that felt like it was consuming me from the inside out. But then I thought, what if you grew up and wanted to find me? What if someday you had questions only I could answer? What if you needed medical history, or just needed to know why I gave you up? If I jumped, those questions would never be answered. I would be taking that choice away from you. So I stepped back from the railing. I went home. I threw myself into building something, anything, to fill the void. Every success, every achievement, every dollar I earned was motivated by the thought, what if she finds me? What if she needs me? I have to be someone worthy of being found. I know now that you never came looking for me, and that's okay. You had a family who loved you, a life that was full and meaningful without me in it. But building this empire gave me a reason to live through the years when living felt impossible. This apartment, this company, this fortune, none of it means anything compared to the joy of watching you become the person you are. But it's all I have to give you now, and I give it freely with no strings attached, no expectations. Live your life, Sarah. Use these resources or don't. Keep the company or sell it. Move into this apartment or never set foot in it again. Whatever you choose, know that you've already given me more than I deserved. The gift of knowing that my daughter is happy, kind, talented, and loved. You saved my life 30 years ago without knowing it. You gave me a reason to keep living. Thank you for that. All my love always. Margaret. Sarah sank onto Margaret's bed, clutching the letter and the tiny hospital bracelet, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal. Eleanor sat beside her, one hand on her back, offering silent comfort. She almost died, Sarah choked out between sobs. Because of me, she almost killed herself. Not because of you, Eleanor corrected gently but firmly. Because she loved you so much that losing you felt unbearable. But she lived, Sarah. She lived for 30 more years, and she spent those years building something extraordinary. You gave her that. Your existence, the possibility that you might someday need her, that's what saved her. Sarah looked around the apartment with new eyes, seeing it not as a monument to success, but as a shrine to survival. Every carefully chosen piece of furniture and framed student artwork representing Margaret's determination to build a life worth living even when her heart was broken. I want to keep it, Sarah said suddenly, surprising herself. The apartment, I mean, and the company. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'll probably make terrible mistakes, but I want to try. I want to honor what she built, what she survived. I want to make her proud. Eleanor's smile was radiant through her tears. Sarah, you already have. Just by being who you are, you've made her proud beyond measure. Everything else is just details. 6 months had passed since Sarah first walked into Eleanor's office, and now she stood in front of the mirror in Margaret's, her apartment, adjusting the collar of a tailored blazer that had been custom-made for her first official day as CEO of Chin Fashion Empire. The reflection staring back at her was both familiar and strange. Same dark eyes, same serious expression, but dressed in clothes worth more than she used to earn in a month, standing in an apartment that still felt like it belonged to someone else. You look just like her, Eleanor said from the doorway, and Sarah turned to find her mentor holding 2 cups of coffee, a morning ritual they had established over the past months of intensive training. Margaret stood in almost that exact spot the morning of her first major investor meeting. She was terrified, just like you are now. Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully, letting the warmth seep into her hands. How did she get past the terror? She reminded herself why she was doing it, not for the money or the prestige, but because she had something to prove, to herself and to the daughter she hoped might someday be proud of her. Eleanor set down her cup and adjusted Sarah's collar with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed this service for Margaret countless times. You have something to prove too. Not to Margaret, she was already proud of you, but to yourself. You need to know you can do this. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of crash courses in business management, fashion industry dynamics, corporate finance, and leadership. Sarah had attended board meetings, reviewed contracts, met with designers and manufacturers, and slowly, painfully, learned to navigate a world that felt entirely foreign to her artist's sensibility. There had been moments of profound doubt, nights when she had stood in this very spot and wondered if she should just sell everything and return to her classroom. But then she would read Margaret's journals again, or look at the student artwork hanging on the walls, or remember the hospital bracelet Margaret had kept for 30 years, and something would shift inside her. This wasn't just about running a company. It was about honoring a legacy, about proving that Margaret's sacrifice hadn't been in vain, about building something meaningful from the ruins of regret and lost time. The senior staff is waiting in the conference room, Eleanor said, glancing at her watch. Are you ready for this? Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. The elevator ride to the 43rd floor felt both too long and too short. Sarah reviewed her notes one last time, Key points Eleanor had helped her prepare, names of the executives she would be addressing, strategic initiatives they needed to discuss. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady. That, at least, was something. The conference room was exactly as intimidating as Sarah had feared. 20 executives sat around a massive table, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical to barely concealed hostile. These were people who had worked with Margaret for decades, who knew the fashion industry inside and out, who had every reason to doubt that a 30-year-old art teacher could possibly lead one of the most successful fashion companies in the world. Sarah walked to the head of the table, Eleanor taking a seat to her right, and looked at each face in turn. She recognized most of them from the intensive meetings of the past months. Patricia Chun, the CFO with her sharp eyes and sharper questions, David Rothstein, head of design, who had been with the company since its founding, Maria Santos, marketing director whose campaigns had defined Chun Fashion's brand identity, and others whose expertise and experience made Sarah feel like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. "Good morning," Sarah began, her voice stronger than she felt. "I know many of you are wondering what a teacher with no business experience is doing standing at the head of this table. It's a fair question. 6 months ago, I was wondering the same thing." She saw a few executives exchange glances, probably expecting a defensive speech about inheritance rights or empty promises about maintaining Margaret's vision. Instead, Sarah took a different approach. Margaret Chin built this company from nothing. She was 23, pregnant, and alone when she started designing clothes in a studio apartment with broken heating. She faced rejection from every bank she approached for a loan. She was told that fashion was too competitive, that she was too young, that she didn't have the right connections or background. Sarah paused, meeting Patricia's skeptical gaze directly. She succeeded anyway, not because she had an MBA or came from money or knew all the right people, but because she had vision, determination, and the ability to see potential where others saw only obstacles. The room was silent now, everyone's attention focused on Sarah. "I'm not Margaret. I will never be Margaret. But I learned something from reading her journals, from studying her life. Success isn't about being the most qualified person in the room. It's about being willing to learn, to adapt, to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you and actually listen to them." Sarah looked around the table. "Each of you is smarter than me in your respective fields. You have decades of experience I'll never match. And that's exactly why Margaret built this team, why she trusted you with her life's work." David Rothstein leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "So what exactly are you proposing? That we continue as we have been while you..." "What? Learn on the job?" "Not exactly." Sarah pulled out a folder, distributing copies of a proposal she and Eleanor had spent weeks developing. "I'm proposing we expand Chin Fashion's mission. Margaret built this company to create beautiful, accessible fashion. I want to add another dimension, social responsibility and investment in the next generation of creative talent." She watched them flip through the pages, seeing their expressions shift from skepticism to surprise to interest as they absorbed her vision. "I'm proposing we establish the Margaret Chin Foundation for Arts Education. 20% of company profits will fund arts programs in underfunded schools, scholarships for students pursuing creative careers, and grants for emerging designers from non-traditional backgrounds." 20%? Patricia's voice was sharp. "That's a significant reduction in shareholder value." "I'm the majority shareholder," Sarah reminded her gently. "And I've done the calculations. Even with that 20% allocation, Chin Fashion will remain highly profitable. What we lose in short-term dividends, we gain in brand differentiation, positive publicity, and access to fresh talent from communities we've never tapped into." She pulled out another document. "Maria, your marketing research shows that consumers, especially younger demographics, increasingly want to support brands with social missions. This isn't just charity, it's smart business." Maria was nodding slowly, already seeing the campaign possibilities. The story alone would be worth millions in organic media coverage. The daughter who inherited a fashion empire and chose to invest in the next generation, honoring her mother's sacrifices by ensuring other talented kids don't have to give up their dreams due to financial limitations. "It would also address something Margaret always struggled with," Eleanor added quietly. "She built an empire, but she always felt it was hollow, built on the foundation of personal loss. This foundation would give her legacy deeper meaning, transform her sacrifice into something that helps thousands of other families avoid having to make similar choices." The room erupted in discussion, executives debating logistics, financial implications, implementation timelines. Sarah watched them argue and collaborate, seeing the energy shift from skeptical resistance to engaged problem-solving. This was what leadership looked like, not having all the answers, but asking the right questions and trusting smart people to find solutions. David raised his hand for attention, and the room quieted. I have one question for you, Sarah. This foundation, these scholarships, the investment in arts education, is this something you're passionate about, or is this you trying to ease your guilt about inheriting a fortune you didn't earn? The question was blunt but fair. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Both. I didn't earn this fortune, and yes, that makes me uncomfortable. But I also spent 5 years teaching kids who have incredible talent, but no resources to develop it. I watched students give up on their dreams because they couldn't afford supplies or couldn't risk pursuing impractical careers. Margaret gave me resources I never asked for. The least I can do is use them to help kids like the ones I taught, like the ones she probably would have helped if she'd had the courage to approach me directly. David's stern expression softened into something like respect. That's a good answer. Margaret would have liked it. The meeting continued for 3 more hours, transforming Sarah's initial proposal into a concrete action plan with budgets, timelines, and measurable objectives. By the time they broke for lunch, Sarah felt exhausted but exhilarated. She had done it, survived her first major leadership challenge, and maybe, just maybe, earned a measure of respect from the people who would determine whether her tenure as CEO would be a success or disaster. As the executives filed out, Patricia lingered behind. You surprised me today, she said. I expected someone trying to play CEO, mimicking business jargon without understanding it. Instead, you showed up as yourself and made a compelling case for why that's exactly what this company needs. She extended her hand. Welcome aboard, Ms. Morrison. I think we're going to do good work together. Sarah shook her hand, feeling tears prick her eyes at the acceptance she heard in Patricia's voice. Thank you. That means more than you know. Sarah Morrison's journey forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about sacrifice, forgiveness, and the weight of choices made in desperation. Margaret Chin believed that giving up her daughter was an act of love, that poverty disqualified her from motherhood, that watching from a distance was all she deserved. But was she right? Could she have found another way, or was her sacrifice the ultimate proof of maternal love, choosing her child's happiness over her own need to be needed? And what about Sarah, who inherited not just billions, but also the crushing responsibility of honoring a stranger's lifetime of regret? If you discovered that someone had loved you so completely from the shadows, building an empire just to be worthy of you, could you forgive their absence? Could you accept that sometimes love means letting go, even when it destroys the person doing the letting? This story reminds us that family is more complicated than blood or legal documents, that wealth cannot heal wounds carved by loss, and that the bravest thing we can do is face our past with honesty rather than judgment. Margaret and Sarah never shared a conversation, never laughed together over coffee, never had the chance to build memories beyond those Margaret stole from a distance. Yet their connection transcended time and silence, proving that love doesn't require proximity to be real. Sarah chose to honor her biological mother not by becoming her, but by transforming her legacy into something that helps others avoid similar heartbreak. In doing so, she turned tragedy into purpose, regret into redemption, and absence into a foundation for presence in countless other lives. What would you do in Sarah's place? Could you forgive the parent who gave you up? Would you keep the fortune or walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and follow our channel for more stories that explore the profound complexity of human connection, sacrifice, and the choices that define who we become.